And now we're recording. Good evening, Internet. This
Top
is
the morning to you.
depending on where you're from. Now we're just going to get back to offending the rest of the former British Empire. It is Matt and Andrew again from Behind the Curve. Matt with some intriguing new hairdo. What is going on up there, man?
It's LA looks. I didn't want to look like a dork without something in my hair, so I can't. I don't have enough like product to slick it back forward, so it looks like I'm going for like an early 2000s spiky look or like a bad cosplay of Cloud Strife.
Yeah, it came out interesting. All right. Wow. Yeah. Okay, that's a thing. It's not bad. It's actually really not bad. I mean, I am getting some Guy Fieri vibes, but that's just me. All right. So, what is our topic today?
It's actually something we really, really both like. King of Elfland's Daughter.
'Tis a fantastic work of the fantastical imagination, written by Lord Dunsany. He's not especially well known in literary circles. He was a turn-of-the-century Irish author.
To make matters more complicated, technically his name is Edward Plunkett, so you could type in his name and technically both have him come up in two different ways, I
Yes,
guess.
he was. It was Edward Harrington Drax Plunkett, the
The third,
something like that. Yes,
yeah.
it's. I say you've made it in life when you're and he wasn't British, he was Irish, but when you're nobility and your middle name is Drax with an X, that's when you've officially made it.
Never met a Drax either.
Intriguing. All right, so we are here to discuss this work, as this is a work that we have both dissected academically before, and we would like to discuss it with you because it's really not known in the classic fantasy canon, and we think it
Well, I
should
know.
be.
Well, I know who we should really think first of all. J.G. Keeley, because without him, you would have never known that this existed. So I think you should pay honor to whom honors due here.
I would say that honors due the author, but sure, let's go with it.
Thank you. And I found out Keeley through Titus Grown review, and then I looked at some of his top 10. This was his second favorite novel of all time, I believe. It might be my favorite novel of all time. I actually like In Certain Ways better than Titus Grown.
All right, so for those of you who aren't familiar with the story of King of Elfland's Daughter, how do we sum this up without giving out spoilers?
It's not really like about the story, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, to be brutally honest, the story is pretty weak. Like not that it's a bad book, but the story is the story's not the model you should use in a writing class.
Well, I kind of like it that way in a way because it kind of reminds me of sort of like 20th century art house, like this Bergman movie that's really more about like his use of color rather than like, oh, the. I think this comes down to like how you like. I like art fantasy more and you like pulp more.
I don't know if it necessarily comes down to the pulp, but I demand a good story with my story.
Yeah, I think honestly he could have, but then again, I think he was kind of looking for more of the children's fairy tale, which tend to be kind of on the shorter side. I mean, technically speaking, The Hobbit was a fairy tale of sorts,
Yeah,
from what I
true.
understand.
The King of Elfland's Daughter, if it was not so flowery in its description, it could easily be taken as an oral fairy tale. Could
There's also
easily
the
be
point.
taken as an oral fairy tale.
Oh yeah, there's also the point that Dunsany kind of was a short story writer, and people think that like as a novelist, he kind of falls more flat. That for like short story collections, like The Sword of Welleran or Moorhead is his thing, and it was him going into uncharted territory essentially.
Yes. I just say it's a book I really enjoy, but I have a hard time recommending it to people because I don't know how many people would like it.
It's totally art fantasy. It's not Harry Potter.
It's yeah, it is. It is almost the opposite of Harry Potter. Wait, come to think of it, like almost in every way.
and pop fantasy in general, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Well, it does carry a lot of it has a lot of fantasy tropes, but not modern ones. It has a lot of classical fantasy tropes. So if you're in the mood for like classical fantasy, like I'm talking like fantasy before everybody tried to rewrite the Lord of the Rings.
Like Conan, almost like Conan, or something like that.
It was something that came earlier. It was something wholly original, like as in fantasy now you do have so much influence from the Lord of the Rings. You have so much influence from Conan. You have a lot of influence from, in some circles, you have influences from Jack
Yeah.
Vance. You have influences from good
He
old
wrote
what's his name?
Lioness or whatever, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
Lionese, Lionessi, I don't know.
It's maybe I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
I don't remember. Um, and who I think and you know other authors who have really influenced fantasy, but this is before that. So there's less of the familiarity that we know with certain tropes, ideas, the idea of conflict. The conflict is sort of magic itself, is the conflict.
Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of got the idea he was going for Mythopoeia or whatever. But
Yeah, mytho-epic. Is that the word you're
Mytho,
looking for? Yeah.
like, he kind of was going a little bit for Mytho-epic, but at the same time, it was more like British fairy tale tradition. But like, I do you think this is more my bias here that I think it's about the writing style because that's my favorite part, and it seems to stuck out, and he seems to take the most time on it. But like, I don't know. It seems like the fairy tale aspect might have been the biggest thing too.
About the writing style. That's a good question. So, I think the writing style is a big question because you know I did a term paper about this.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, good one too. Great one.
Thank you. So I was looking at the context he was writing, and he was an Irish author. He was very much related to the Irish revivalists, the Irish, but essentially the modern Irish Romantic movement. You know,
From what I understand, that kind of intersected with the whole nationalist, like let's make a nationalist literature thing that kind of came out after the post 1922 independence movement.
yeah, it was Yeats. What's her name?
Ulysses with Joyce's Ulysses, I think too.
I'm not sure about Joyce's Ulysses, but definitely
I kind of
Yeats.
clump that into like the not
Actually,
romantic, but
yeah,
like
no,
the
no, you're
nationalist.
right. You're right. Joyce would definitely fit in here. It'd be Joyce, Yeats, and a lady, good old lady. What's her name? Lady, I forget. There's a
I know who you're
female.
talking about
You
though.
know who I'm talking about. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. So he was involved with these people. He actually wrote a play at James Joyce. I think it was either James Joyce or W.B. Yeats's request. He got Lord Dunsany to write a play for him. So even though he sets this in the British forest, in quotation, I I think it is very Irish. It's the storytelling is uh, very Irish. And also the idea of the she, which is the unseen other world, the fairyland, which is essentially where the main character goes, and the interactions between um, fairyland and the real world. That's where the
Well,
conflict comes from, and the idea of sort of the yeah the Irish
well, I was gonna
she.
say, so like that. I don't really know Irish stuff as much as you do, but
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of like noticed that like Fairyland is kind of a common stock location in British fairy tales. But it sounds like you kind of know like it comes from a larger tradition of Irish myth. What is it? She isn't like supposed to be she like a person like the Princess of Elfland. You mean like she something in Gaelic?
Uh, she is something in Gaelic. It's spelled Sidhe usually. And I think, and as far as I remember, it's pronounced she. It's
Okay.
both the other world and the people that come from it. But so on one side you have J.R.R. Tolkien talks about this as basically on one side. Thank you, sir. On one side we have sort of like the idea of the fairies and the fairies and um, you know brownies that's sort of a universal sort of that is a very British thing, and J.R.R. Tolkien talks about that sort of the child's fairy tales, the child's fairies, and there being like a fairyland, like almost like we see in William Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream with
Yeah.
Oberon and Titania. They're very they're playful. They're kind of all over the place. But then you see some of this in Irish literature, but like there are prankster fairies, but there's something
Kind of
much
like the Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell fairies, like kind of like elusive, kind of human, insane. I know leprechauns are kind of like tamed from like what we understand of them.
Oh
They would
yeah,
be
oh yeah.
like accidentally you have you jump off a bridge and you die and they laugh about it, basically.
Yeah, like the Irish idea of a fairy is a lot more like there are like the other world is there's the seed and then there's she and there's also Tir na Nog, the ageless land, which and you have places in the world where you can cross between these places, and there's a large amount of nobility and mysticism to this, like yeah, there are playful fairies out there, but there's also evil fairies, there's also noble fairies. There are places where time doesn't quite work, and you could see an ancient warrior from the past cross over and things, and the interaction, sort of the timelessness of their fairy tale and the nobility of it, the nobility and the the nobility and grace of those fairy tales is what we
So
see in Dunsany, and also on in Tolkien, with the idea of sort of, as you see in like Lothlorien, where there's where yes, we have these sort of these elven creatures, but they are not running around pulling little girls' pigtails and pushing boys in the mud. They're they're other. They are out there. They are part of a world incredibly more ancient than we.
it's kind of funny you get this to kind of ground this in what maybe our listeners might understand better. So I see like Tolkien's writing more talking about this in the Lost Tales. That's those books I wanted to give you, showed you in my room. But would Tolkien's modern day equivalent, like once all his manuscripts were published, would be like Valinor, like the Undying Islands or something, or for she?
Uh, okay, so for Tir na Nog, the Undying
No,
Lands
for she. Oh, okay, yeah,
would
that
would
would be that would be
would be, I mean, roughly the same. For the idea of the she, it'd be the closest thing I can give you is a a more a more placid version of the Feywild, if that makes sense. Like the Feywild from Dungeons and Dragons. I know that might not help you,
I
but
mean, I have the audience. I mean,
I guess Lothlorien would not be the word. Or actually, I don't. It's something that doesn't necessarily have a description in our context. It's
what it also reminds me of, like with how H.P. Lovecraft, he was actually a big fan of Dunsany, and he took this like sense of other and kind of added a horror element to it, as well as the works of Ambrose Bierce and Robert Chambers. But he got a lot from Dunsany. I
that
don't know if you
actually
noticed
makes
that
sense.
because you read H.P. Lovecraft, right?
I a little bit. Not wait. Did Lovecraft was a fan of Ambrose Bierce, the Civil War general?
He was an officer and a writer.
Like
No, not Pierce Bierce, but they were both in the Civil War.
No, I meant Bierce. He would. I thought he's not a general though, right?
There's an Ambrose Pierce and an Ambrose Bierce. Burnside or something. But Ambrose
Burnside was a
Bierce,
general. He's not.
yeah, but
Yeah.
Ambrose Bierce was in the Civil War, and he wrote short stories that were kind of like horror, kind of supernatural. He was basically the most proto Lovecraft out there.
He's the guy who disappeared in
Mexico.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So now I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
But he was a writer in San Francisco who largely inspired Lovecraft, and before that, Chambers.
I had not heard of that connection before, actually.
Yeah, Ambrose Bierce. I have a short story collection for all his good stuff, underlined for edition J.G. Keeley liked, so I could read as Keeley did. And as for Chambers, he wrote a collection of also short stories that are kind of Lovecraftian called The King in Yellow, which I also have in my room at home.
Hastur, the King in Yellow. Or
Yes,
however you pronounce it.
Hastur the Shepherd and Hatia the Shepherd. Actually, True Detective based the first season off of The King in Yellow intentionally.
Really?
Yeah.
That'd be good for creepy stuff.
Well, when Matthew McConaughey is talking about timing a flat circle, that's what he's talking about.
All right.
Everything's connected, so Cloud Atlas was right, but everything's more connected in fiction, especially in Ireland when it's a small country and you know everybody's name.
Hey, when everybody knows your name. It's like Cheers, except a country. That's probably incredibly insulting, and probably not like that at all.
Love alcohol though, and home of Guinness.
Uh, People are not going to be happy. The former British Empire is going to come and crush us. So,
When we talk about the writing style, because the funny thing about Dunsany is, and Keeley admitted this, even though I think you kind of did a better job in your paper describing it. It works and it's beautiful. It's probably my favorite writing style, second to Peaks of Titus Groan. What do you think made it work? Because I could never place my thumb. We only read it once, but I could never get like what made it work.
in what sense are you wondering if it made it work?
For me, it was kind of remembering things about when I was younger and remembering how like I saw the world and just ways my psyche worked. And I think just is common to humanity in a lot of levels, not universal, but just very common that he captured that, especially during this one part that stands out when the witch is enchanting the sword of Alveric. Just something about that like made me really, it was like my favorite part.
Oh, the part where it talks about her growing lightning bolts under the cabbages in her garden.
No, the actual part. Well, that was a good part too. But like the part where she's like actually in the process of enchanting, she like enchanted with the song of a maiden and with this and with that.
Yes, the truly fantastical spell she casts.
Yeah,
I love that part. I love that part. That was the
that's
part
probably
that
my favorite part. I don't know about you.
uh okay, for me, I think okay, I'm not my favorite part is the very end part with the tears of Zerundaril. That was
Is that the Princess of Elfland?
no, the witch when
Oh,
the witch is crying. That one might be my favorite part, but when she's enchanting the sword is like easily at the top. It's those are both very well written scenes. The book has some part or I think the part where Alveric is traveling with all the crazy people.
yeah, that's also kind of like when they're introduced. I like that part too.
I like and as they kind of break apart and then yeah, it's such a the narrative is not complex.
No,
It is not necessarily compelling, but it is how it works. That's
yeah, it just escapes words, isn't it? That's another thing about its uniqueness.
yes, it just works. It is an independent unit. I think I'll say that it is a fantasy world without long introduction.
Because we've already lived in it in a way. That's kind of the best way of putting it.
Yeah, it's like it's something that we've never seen, but we all know what we're looking at when we read it. If that makes any sense.
Keeley once said that the fantasy of the future won't be work because it's fantastical because it's so familiar, and that's I think what he meant, and that's I'm glad that you got to read the book to kind of see like what I like in Keelian fantasy that you really don't see outside of Peak, in my opinion, at that level.
Mm.
But for the most part, I can think of some exceptions, but for the most part, that's probably like the prime place. And yet he's forgotten. You kind of research this. Why do you think like Dunsea's kind of forgotten among like the Irish greats?
That's an excellent question. I honestly don't know why. I, I mean, his political writing, like he didn't really have a lot of political writing. I
Like
mean,
about Ireland itself? Like,
y-
is that what people are known for? Is that what you're saying? Like how we usually
yes,
get known back then?
yeah, and also if I remember, I don't remember off the top of my head, but if I remember correctly, the Dunseneys were Anglicans, not Catholics,
That would make them all the more unpopular, I would
which
think.
is which if I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly. There's one mention of of Dunsany in my Irish history textbook, and I think it was said
Well,
that the Dunsany estate was the Dunsany estate was like one of the Anglican estates, or they were bought by the Anglican or something to that
Well, you
effect.
can always look into like baptism records, I guess, like far enough back to like a certain church, you'll probably find his name.
Right. Yeah. So which makes sense. I mean, if you're part of the sort of the English backed aristocracy in England around sorry, in Ireland around the turn of the century, you're not exactly going to be winning too many popularity contests.
For one, I understand he was pro independence, wasn't he? Or he didn't seem to have a problem. I know he
Well,
moved out of.
he interacted and worked with the people who were pro independence.
That's
So
made me think that he's pro
yeah,
independence. Yeah,
which is, I mean, and,
or maybe he's kind of low-fi about it. He don't want to like draw the ire of London, like during that time really when people were really killing British troops in the name of a new country.
yeah, and the Irish are getting mowed down by the British. That was a messy time. That was a really messy time.
It was kind of like amazing timing with his life. I mean, I don't consider that a coincidence, but like just who he knew, it's almost movie worthy.
Dunsany movie. Somebody get on that. All 6 of our listeners will be very excited. Hey, maybe that should be your film project. The Lord Dunsany, the movie. I can't even talk. So, how do we even like? If you were gonna pitch this to somebody listening, if you could in two sentences, give this book to somebody who has no background in it at all whatsoever, how would you pitch it in 2 sentences?
This is like an Irish fairy tale where the writing is so good it would be like you got your dreams recorded. And you might want to skip the last part with the unicorn scene, which I felt dragged a little on, but for the most part you can skip around and really enjoy it.
It doesn't have to be read in order.
No,
That's
I
also
don't think it
true.
does.
It doesn't quite
Not
like.
truly, no.
I think it's better if you read it in order, but you can open to almost any page and be like, "Whoa!" It is a very very special book. Uh, one thing I also think about is the growing intrusion of the fantastical onto the regular world.
Which is kind of the opposite of Tolkien, because his point was like the fantastic was going away, especially during the fourth age of men. That this is kind of like the opposite of that.
You're right. That is the opposite of a fantasy trope. Because in most fantasy, the fantasy trope is the golden age is behind us and we're going downhill. We have magic because of those guys who came back there, and goodness only knows what happened to them.
I think that might be more uniquely Irish because that's kind of a almost a ancient Greek mythic idea because you have like, the golden age of gods and silver age and like right because like I can't help
Oh
but think
yeah,
that's like more of a mainland Europe thing rather than and it's kind of like their own Irish take on it, almost like contrarian thing.
it is contrary. It could also be seen as modernist, but the whole thing as a whole is not at all modernist. It's very
So
romantic.
yeah, which isn't quite modernist. It definitely is a romantic novel. I would say that.
It's very romantic. Very very romantic. And for those of you out there, by romantic, we do not mean smoochy smoochy. We mean as in the capital R, romantic, the
There was
romantics.
some smoochy though.
There was a little bit.
It was not a kissing book, like that one kid in Princess Bride says.
Oh, Grandpa. There you go. It's okay. The first one wasn't so bad. But
The
yeah, no,
first one, there's a Princess Bride 2.
no, I meant like the first part of the book. Never mind.
No.
But
Princess Bride 2 would not work.
oh, Princess Bride too. Oh, just like that'd be a letdown. That'd be such a letdown. And see, the thing is, like, it wouldn't be good. Like, it'd be like 10 years later. It'd be a straight to DVD release. They'd have knock-in Carrie Elways.
Actually, according
Knock
to
off. What
the
is with the
book, I
internet?
read the original book and it was called Buttercup's Baby. It was like a fake excerpt for a sequel at the very end. It was about like them going to an island with a giant tree on it. It was a joke, but I was like, yeah, this is what they'd use.
Yeah, this would be. And then, hey, look. Then, if that actually caught on and a bunch of people went to see it on opening night, think about it. Then we'd be entering like Alpha and Omega 4 territory.
There were like 5 direct DVD sequels, I think, or something
We
like
should
that.
we should review one.
Madden Drew react.
But internet, what are we watching?
Andre the Giant dies in the sequel at the end of the book, though.
Oh,
Yeah, he like fell from the tree or something. I don't know.
oh, Andre.
Another reason not to produce it.
Boo! So, The King of Elfland's Daughter. We like it. We like it a lot. And we think you should read it. And I don't want to spoil it at all. So, Matt, do you have any more thoughts on this?
Well, there's one thing that we kind of disagree. I said you
Yes.
said it was more planism, and I said it didn't really fit. I am kind of biased because I don't believe planism can even work, but well, at least the theory of the forms. But you kind of talk more about that. I think in the non messed up that episode we tried to like record King of Star got lost.
Yeah, the one that got corrupted a couple months ago, actually. No, it was just saying that, kind of it's the ascension to a higher world, the overflowing of good things down into the below realm, the real world, and when they're brought together, there's some element of beauty, tranquility. Though I don't know, it's not necessarily great for the people there when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, like I agree with that. It kind of in a very superficial way, kind of like mirrors those ideas. But yeah, I feel like it kind of is more like changed this idea of Irish myth kind of more consistently. I think that's for authorial intent purposes what he was going for.
To me it reeks of Irishness in a good way. It's yeah, it's also the names he uses. The names he uses are incredible. It's like you named something Zarundaril. I can barely even spell it. For
It has
those
a very like Lovecraftian otherness to it, like not like Cthulhu like trying to make you go insane, but like not based on like
they
even
don't
human grammar,
they
you
don't
know?
live here. It's like
Yeah,
they don't live here. It's like, but do you know any parent who would name their child, Ziroondel? That's not even close to spelling. Zerun. I'm not even gonna try anymore. I had
you
to
know,
spell it several times for the paper.
this is my anti-Tolkienness coming out, but it's kind of funny how like Tolkien, with like all his knowledge and correct constructing like a fictional, consistent language like Elvish, can't really get that sort of otherness to it that like Dunsey kind of makes almost by accident. Which I don't think by accident, but like compared to Tolkien, like he's messing around.
That was not his. That was not Tolkien's goal. The goal was to feel. I mean, except with the elves and the elves, as we
I meant
know.
the elves.
So you don't feel that with the elves.
No, who's else? Tolkien's or Dunsany's?
Tolkien, I feel it with both their elves because I see their elves as very similar.
That's fair.
I mean, I see their elves as born from the same concept, but I do get you in the fact that yes, Tolkien's elves are more human-like.
Well, was Tolkien's point that Elvish kind of like evolved into the modern day European languages, or is just like it was just supposed to be completely fictional?
Sorry, I will cut that. Just
Fine,
where was I? Oh, right. So modern language. I don't know. I don't remember.
I know he's like I think he based it off like several languages. I think when Nordic one a Nordic
Yeah, the
language.
whole runic part of it was Nordic, at least if I remember correctly.
Interesting. Tolkien was smart, and he did some pretty complicated things. I will say that.
His opinion. Have you read the one about critics and monsters?
The Monsters, the Critics, his essay he wrote in like the 50s or whatever. Was
You
that
sh-
kind of reacting to his like weird fan base that kind of existed around the time with like the
no, it was reacting to the critics who criticized the writing of fantasy and criticized the Lord of the Rings for a number of reasons.
were they like literary critics from like Oxford or like
some of them
the
were,
British
yeah.
elite? Okay.
It was mostly the British elite who did not like the Lord of the Rings. For the same reason that the literary elite have never liked the speculative fiction genre.
Yeah, I only wish that he was alive for Moorcock's epic poo. Then he kind of really would have had like a more of a dialogue. But I think that like even though Lord of the Rings is an extremely British novel in character, that
Heck yes, it is British as anybody's business.
it's as British as a guy in a bowler hat,
eating a crumpet,
with his bulldog.
running across a moor, smoking a pipe, and invading most of the world. What? The British
Okay.
Empire is a huge theme in these videos.
Yeah. They do make the best fantasy. They should really cut that out.
I love me. I love British literature. If you had to, like, I know, shh, but if I had to pick between American and British literature, British literature.
Yeah, I hate to say, I probably would too. That's the thing.
Yeah,
Like, if you wanted to study for your master's in Britain, even though it's literally another country, like I'd
yeah.
be like, go do that. I mean, my one crazy English teacher went to Scotland to study, so I'm really not that
If I get into the grad program I want to get in, I will be in Scotland briefly, very briefly. But the dean of our English department, she studied in Ireland for a while.
Yeah, but then you and your true love might not never meet again.
But I'll take the fair.
Scotland just has like it's funny. Brendan's got all this fantasy novel, but like Scotland's like all the inventors.
Scotland is a fantasy novel.
Scottish people like they gotta be careful. Like they cough and then they just invent like the telephone like a dragon.
Alexander Graham Bell sneezes and just the whole telephone just comes flying out of him. I'm pretty sure that's not how it happened.
And Sean Connery played that one dragon in that '90s movie too. Now I think about it.
So if Sean Connery sneezes, the telephone happens.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Because Scotland.
Because Scotland. Oh my goodness. All right, so I've hit my talking points. Have you hit your talking points?
I'm gonna do two ones quickly.
Sure.
So someone like Keeley, who's very into Nietzsche, kind of argued that it's sort of the whole idea behind Killing Elfland's Daughter is kind of like anti-logic. Like Elfland really isn't a very logical place. A big quote from him, directly quoted, is that the book recalls a remote place in childhood before we had decided whether sanity or madness was likely to bear finer fruits. I begin to wonder if I chose wrongly.
I mean, like, I'm not a big Nietzsche person.
I mean, neither am I. I never read him, but
I have. It is like Nietzsche is the philosophical equivalent of a 5-year-old smashing a tractor against a baseboard and hoping something happens. Occasionally, progress is made. It's not something that I like, but the one thing there is I don't think it's anti-logic. I think it is logical, but it works by a different logic. It's not that it's illogical. I would agree. It just has a different logic.
Yeah, I mean, like the only point that I could see there is like how Elric recruits madmen to help find Elfland, but other than that, I really can't see the point there. And just the fact that Elfland's kind of different from England in general.
Yeah, it's outside. It's like it'd be like trying to psychoanalyze. It'd be like trying to psychoanalyze characters in a tabletop game, or characters in a traditional fairy tale. You can't do it. It's because they're not. There's not there because the point is not to have character development particularly. It's
I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
And as Freud said, the Irish are the one race who are resistant to psychoanalysts. So there you go.
Is this Freud?
Yeah. Well, it's misquoted from him, but it's kind of more of as it's seen as a joke now.
Interesting.
A lie the Irish tell themselves, apparently, along with leprechauns, I guess.
Well, there was the one thing about was it Joyce or Yeats was talking about that about the preservation of the Irish language, about the continuation of the idea of Irishness in English, and I think this book was. I think this book was an attempt to do that, to conceal Irishness inside Englishness and use it.
You mean like in the way that Star Wars is sometimes considered the modern American myth, or more as a nationalistic point of pride.
More as in a national preservation of language and the integrity of language and such things.
So one last question.
Yes.
In what ways has King of Elfland's Daughter changed how you write and how you see fantasy?
It is okay. So two things. Fantasy does not need to be epic in scope to be epic in execution. That is one thing.
That's, in my opinion, what the Lord of the Rings kind of messed with us too much a bit. Like, kind of, it has to be epic. But you're right.
Yeah, no. The thing is like this. Epics are great when they're epic.
Yes.
And there have been a lot of unepic epics. And the other thing I think I learned from this is that don't be afraid to embrace the weird, because just because something's weird doesn't mean it can't feel real. The weird can feel real if you make it real.
I would never attempt it, but yeah, Dunsany actually pulls it off, and I think he's a bit of a primer on how to use the fantastic in fiction, just in general for anything, even like an unlikely event within like a drama, to a certain extent.
Yeah, it is lovely. Okay, so thank you very much, and now we are moving on to questions and answers. Okay, I will go first. I have one ready.
Okay.
Super Bowl prediction.
I think it's gonna be like the Patriots and maybe like let's see who's in the
Patriots and the Rams are the only ones left.
Okay, yeah, I think. But why did you ask me?
Well, because I want to know who you think's gonna win.
who's gonna win? Who's gonna get in? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a cynic. I'm just gonna say it's the Patriots. Brady has been as a quarterback for as long as he has for a reason. And as much as I don't think that we won last year, I'm an Eagles fan. We won by accident. It was a very close game, and it was just 1 point after another. We won. They won. They won a little bit. We won a little. So I just think it's going to be Brady and the Pates.
Okay. Your question for me, sir.
Do you personally prefer a more believable dialogue style? I gave the example of Shane Carruth, who did a movie called Primer. You've never really watched it, but more conversational, like how we're talking now, or a poetic one trying to convey ideas like Shakespeare's, because I know you're kind of a Shakespeare fan.
Depends on what I'm trying to write. Like in my book, I'm trying to write more poetic because it fits in with the setting. It's supposed to be timeless. Using modern slang would bring it down. But if I'm writing a book set in the current day, of course I'm going to use conversational. I think you have to suit it to your subject matter.
Is this sort of like Americanized psychology and slang, kind of more of a attempt to translate, for a better word, ideas rather than like to say what they're actually thinking so much? I don't really understand that.
I don't really. I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at.
Like they're not. I don't know. I really haven't read the novel, so I.
Okay, we can talk. We can talk about that later. Actually, it seems interesting.
It just seems like certain like ways of talking reflected more American ways of thinking.
Oh, okay.
Rather than actual phrases, like it's kind of a shoehorn modern day American psychology.
Oh, okay. Actually, that makes sense. That's fair. That's actually a fair thing, because if you're using modern verbiage in another world, that's gonna be weird, because words develop differently there, or at least you can do what I think Tolkien did very well. He kind of said, you're not English. This is translated into English. They're speaking something else entirely.
Yeah.
So I think that notion is kind of key to an immersive fantasy. Okay, so here's a question for you that I have. Do you think books need to have realistic passage of time?
No, but I would have to have a really good reason to break that. I have yet to see. Well, there's only one movie I think that kind of breaks, at least for a movie, because the movies are slightly more my thing. A deconstruction of time and a different use of his primer, because it's an actual time travel movie.
Yeah.
Other than that, it just kind of seems finicky.
Okay.
Like I really can't think of other than dealing with time travel, like why you would necessarily do. Oh, or well, sometimes it's like good for mysteries. Like you said, show a
Okay.
little context for this and that. Citizen Kane is really great at
Okay.
this, in
Yeah.
my opinion. It starts out with Rosebud, and then it goes back. It kind of goes a little bit back in time. Then goes really back in Charles Foster Kane's life. So I I think rarely is acceptable. You have to have a reason. You can't just gimmick it, in
Okay.
my opinion.
That makes sense. And for me.
Okay, so this is revenge from last time.
Uh-oh.
What is your persona?
Oh, jeez. Oh, okay. So this is for those of you who missed last week. I slipped into trash question because I couldn't think of a second one that week, so I just grabbed the first one I could think of. Why is it the first one I think of? I don't know yet. I don't really know. I have played both. I have played I've played two different Beast characters in our Pathfinder game, which is going on over on the channel that I and the
Crypto Bunny.
yes Crypt Bunny and I have played both Kazaroth and Mihishka. Kazaroth is closer to my personality, though a lot meaner.
Oh,
So closest thing I can give you is that.
so what species is he?
Kazaroth is a Lycan, so it's a wolf person in our Pathfinder homebrew setting that we've worked on for a couple of years, and Mihishka is a Tabaxi.
Okay, and you're gonna stream tomorrow, right?
Sunday, I think. I think we're doing Sunday for streaming. We're doing good.
Okay,
We actually have a good bit of we actually have a good bit of views on ours a little bit.
you got 17 subscribers. That's
I
really
know. I want to try and like bump some of them over here. Oh, actually, if I subscribe to this channel, then
it'll
that'll
bump
show
up
up in
in
the
subscribers.
yeah. So I'm actually gonna do that.
Good. I mean, we love cross promotion here.
We
It's the only
do.
reason why I
We
brought
are
it up.
forming a media empire.
With personas.
Okay. And on that note, we leave you for this week. So, signing off for Behind the Curve, I'm Andrew.
Matthew.
There we go, and we bid you adieu.